All right. Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the first call of 2020. It's very exciting. Why don't we go around and introduce ourselves? I hope everyone has a link to our Google Doc. Let me know if you don't, I can add it to the chat again. But why don't we go around and introduce ourselves, starting with the list, starting with the names on the list in the doc. So Duane, if you could go first, that'd be great. And just your name, where you work and what you do.
All right. Duane Degler, design for, what?
1 second, sorry. I just wanted to remind everyone, if you're not talking, please mute your microphone. Thank you.
Great. Well, it's a great group of people. Yeah, Duane Degler, Design for Context. I'm one of the principals here, and we do primarily user-centered design and development of interactive applications. And I lead up the activities for cultural heritage as part of my work in information architecture and design.
Great. Anna? Okay, not hearing Anna right now.
Oh, is that me?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, hi. Sorry, it's been a while since I've joined you on one of these calls. I'm Anna Nerita Moya. I'm the project director for the Indigenous Digital Archive. And we're just celebrating the award of our second IMLS National Leadership Grant. That's going to let us dive into some experimentation and some user experience refinements.
Oh, that's so great. Congratulations.
Thank you. All IIIF based, of course.
Yeah, great. I'm Tina. I'm at the Art Institute of Chicago. I'm a developer here, and I work on in-gallery applications and web also. And I'm also one of the co-chairs of the museum, IIIF Museums Group. Thanks. Next.
I think it's me. My name is Josh Hadro. I'm the managing director of the IIIF Consortium, and I work with Glenn to support all these groups and all you folks.
Okay. And I am Danielle Uchatel. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Gallery Systems, and we support IIIF in a number of our products, so I'm trying to stay on the cutting edge if possible.
Rob Lancefield at the Yale Center for British Art, where I'm head of IT.
Hey everybody, I'm Dan Brennan from the Princeton University Art Museum. I'm an application developer for collections, so I manage our data and image services and any applications that consume or deliver that stuff.
Okay, and Megan Gross is next. She doesn't have a mic, and I'll just read out her chat. I'm Megan Gross from the Baltimore Museum of Art. I'm the manager of digital asset services, manager of our DAMs, which is using Piction, and rights and repro.
Hi, I'm Glenn Robson, the IIIF Technical Coordinator. I work with Josh in the IIIF Consortium and I help people implement IIIF.
Hi everyone, I'm Rana Chan. I'm the Digital Assets and Rights Coordinator at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum.
Hi everyone, I'm Charlie Butcosk. I'm a developer that works with Duane's team at Design for Context, and my sort of second hat is as a digital projects developer for the Colby College Museum of Art.
Oh, Megan also doesn't have a mic. I'm Digital Scholarship Art Librarian at Oklahoma State. Toby?
Hi, this is Toby Reiter. I'm from the Archives of American Art. I'm a web developer there, but the majority of my work is doing workflow programming for finding aids, but particularly interested in the O'Keeffe project because I've heard a lot about it from Duane.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, I'm Mike Liesenbaum. I'm a developer in digital assets management and preservation at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. And one of the things I do is, you know, I put together and manage our IIIF infrastructure there.
I'm Rich Palmer, tech leader at the Victoria and Albert Museum, and we use lots of IIIF on our website.
Hi, I'm Worthy Martin at the University of Virginia. Computer science faculty, but acting director of the Institute for Advanced Technology and Humanities. We're not a museum per se, and I'm new to this call, but we do a lot of cultural heritage things that are using or want to use IIIF.
Hello, I'm Nicole Scalessa. I'm head of digital scholarship and technology services at Vassar College. I'm relatively new here. I began in July. This is my first time on one of these calls. Our Loeb Museum, Art Museum, is investigating options for IIIF and a new DL. So that's why I'm here.
I'm Nikhil Trivedi. I'm a director of engineering at the Art Institute of Chicago.
And
sorry, I have too many windows open. I'm Stacey Redick. I work at the Folger Shakespeare Library, and most of what I do is product design, user experience, and information architecture.
Okay, great. That's, did we miss anyone? I don't know if anyone joined late. Please speak up, and here's the link to the doc again, if you haven't.
Hi, I'm Ilya. I am with Tina and Nikhil here at the Art Institute.
All right. Well, welcome again, everyone. Happy New Year. Good to see a nice turnout today. And why don't we get right into the announcements, Josh?
Sure. Yeah, it is a lovely turnout. Thanks for all joining us. This is just to kind of reiterate, we sent this out just before I think folks went out on holiday break, but we've published the call for proposals or panels and sessions for our annual conference, for the IIIF annual conference that's happening this year, June 1 to 4. And so I've just pasted the link. It's also in the agenda to a Google form. It's pretty straightforward, but it's the form you could use to propose anything from like a 7-minute lightning talk up to a half-day workshop and a couple of different options in between. So we're really eager to get as many, as much variety of content as we can. And so we urge folks to submit panels and sessions sooner rather than later, but the deadline is February 3rd. And from there, we'll have registration opening up for that conference pretty soon after that. And then, yeah, we'll get going.
Great. Any questions? Okay. All right. Well, let's move right into our presentations for today. We have Duane and Rana, and I will just hand it over to you. Duane or Rana, I don't know which of you would like to go first.
I think I will start.
Okay.
Just to let you know that with Charlie Butcosk on the call, he was also very active in the development of all of this and has really been instrumental, and he is on the call and has permission to chime in at any time. And if you have any questions along the way, folks, let us know and we will work from there. All right. So let me just maximize that out. So just a couple slides to give you a little bit of an introduction here to what we're doing and a little bit of the background of how we're doing it in order to then get into the demo so then you can see it and see how it interacts. And then Rana will talk more about the O'Keeffe's plans and aspirations and things that they want to try and achieve with it as well. So we're really excited about this project, and it certainly it uses IIIF, but it's also really foundational as a linked art project for in order to be able to work with linked data to step back, the reasons for doing this, when we started working with the O'Keefe, they have an IMLS grant that started it off in 2016. And as we began in 2017 talking about it, the question of what is the role of the institution was coming up a lot in the early conversations and focusing very much on their important role in understanding her practice. People come to them all the time and they just say, we want to understand how she worked, how she had this vision, what her influence was, not only her influences, but her influence on others through American modernism. And so the idea that had been there somewhat nascent and really became much more fully formed is how do we make sure that a site gives you an opportunity to sort of see this well-rounded picture of her as an artist, as a person who collaborates with others, as a person who has her own sort of practice and discipline, and connects eventually to a much, much wider subject area. And so the fostering of relationships between different people in her life. She had a tremendous network of people who were actively engaged with her. The places that she was in, New York, Virginia, starting out in Wisconsin, where she was born, and then settling really into what she's probably best known for, which was her life in New Mexico. But we wanted to do it in a way, and the IMLS grant was originally written by the O'Keefe as a way of saying what they wanted was a foundation. So the original grant was for a hub of their different systems. So it was their collections management system for the artworks and the art collection, their archival system, their library system, and digital asset management system, with aspirations for others. And so it was called the digital infrastructure. And they were concerned in 2016 that that they would like to do it with linked data, but they weren't sure that it was feasible to do it with linked data. And so coming out of work that we had done with the American Art Collaborative and some work we were doing with one or two other institutions, we proposed it in 2017 as a linked data project because we felt that would give them the best opportunity to really grow out the capabilities that would be available. And by the end of September of 2018, what became known as Dig In was launched internally for staff use. And then in the beginning of 2019, we worked with them to bring out this beta of a collections browser, a cross-collection browser that is now available publicly. So the architecture, I'm not going to go too deeply into the architecture, but as I said, there's 4 primary sources. They're looking at other things now that they want to add as well. Those of you who know Dale Cronkrite know that he's very enthusiastic in conservation technology, and he's been looking at some opportunities. There are others within the organization who are thinking about other kinds of assets that could potentially interlink with this. And this is where the linked data part becomes important. Linked data is essentially both a modeling language and a standard for creating open and extensible data sets. So it takes typical data elements, a person, a place, art object, and creates related connections between them. And so we started with mapping and transform exercises that took both the linked art specifications, which at the time were coming out of the American Art Collaborative work that had been done, and linked art was just beginning to formulate out to extend and expand the nature of those. So you'll have noticed on the title slide, I said linked art plus, because there were a lot of areas that linked art at the time was not covering and is still in the process of working on. But it is essentially a schema and a set of ontologies that allow the modeling of these relationships between different types of objects and such to be done in a way that's consistent and shareable externally and internally, and also allowed to be expanded. And so we've expanded it ourselves using the patterns of linked art for looking at modeling archival materials, both at the item level and at the hierarchy, the archival hierarchy level, to also, look at how we might be able to interrelate comfortably with the personal library using MARC exports there. So all the exports out of the source systems are either pretty much spreadsheets or XML. We take out some, information from the dams and the art collection. The archives are EAD exports, and the library using MARC. Charlie wrote a series of transformations and mappings from there to RDF, the Resource Description Framework, which is the formalized language of linked data and allows those relationships to be held in a common and consistent database. We also then did do exercises as part of the pipelines that do this to reconcile, so they keep IDs in the source systems about, for example, using ULAN and AAT from the Getty vocabularies for people, for subjects. Those IDs are in the source systems, and likewise some from Library of Congress, particularly in around the archives and library materials. And so the reconciliation allows us to take those identifiers and some local identifiers that are specific to the O'Keeffe Museum, and to reconcile them to allow the crosswalks to be done between these different resources. So even if they don't speak exactly the same language, they're able to speak an interconnected language. And then at the same time, we're not doing much with inferencing, but there is a facility within, within the semantic and linked data community to look for patterns in the data and identify where those patterns may be showing up similarities and, again, additional connections and relationships. So in order to make this more performant and operational, then we do a couple other things. We query out of the triple store into JSON LD. So all of the main objects that you see are rendered into the linked data version of JSON, and that's stored in Elasticsearch, so it becomes very easy for the applications to use it. And we also generate manifests for IIIF. And so that's done, again, out of the triple store in conjunction. All of this is done at the same time in terms of the pipelines, and the assets themselves are also transported up into IIIF server, which is, I think we're using Cantaloupe, but Charlie can correct me if I'm wrong on that. So these are going to two places. They go out to the collections browser, which we built as a static site. The data doesn't move that often, and it reduces a lot of the deployment complexity to do it as a static site with some extensive extensive JavaScript for various interactivity that's done on the site. And at the same time, then a full dump of all of those, all of the linked data resources are also posted out to the O'Keeffe GitHub site. So anybody who wants to do their own more extensive research has access to the raw data directly. So you see, we don't use the Triple Store live in production, in sort of public-facing production. It's really used very much as a resource. At the same time, what we do there is make sure that both the details and depth that you can go into for specialized queries within this Triple Store and from the Elasticsearch JSON LD are available for future applications and for other kinds of applets and such that were talked about, maybe being able to either embed, into other types of other areas of their web pages, or make up used across multiple applications. And the other thing that it can do is eventually potentially provide an opportunity to create a community among institutions who want to just plug in linked data resources that can be shared across multiple institutions. And so both of those are being looked at. They're not actually actively in development, but we wanted to think about this architecture in a way that could serve all of those things. So that's probably enough of the nuts and bolts for me. Are there any questions before we actually dive in and look at the cool stuff, which is the site itself?
Duane, I don't know when you'd like to talk about it, but you got an arrow going over to reconcile entities. I'd be interested to know a little bit more about that, what that process looks like, maybe after we see the cool stuff or something.
Yeah, we can dip back into that in just a little bit. That sounds fine. So remind me as we go through, and we'll come back to that one. All right. So the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum site. I'm just going to swap on over to the site itself. And as I said, it's coming from multiple sources. And the important part of it was to be able to show this holistic picture. So right from its landing page, we want to be sure that people recognize that there's art, there's photography from numerous people in the collection. The collection includes also homes, and two homes, and all of her personal effects and belongings. Her personal library, so this was actually her working library when she was alive and a working artist, the archives, and her circle. So as we come in, you can see then that each of those has their own major area, and all of them come to landing pages where you can see an array of things that are available. These are all fed via Elasticsearch. The photography, as you'll see, has a lot of different people who she interacted with regularly in the desert Southwest and in New York, and the artwork by her. The artist materials are very interesting. There's, this is something that's not fully photographed and digitized yet, but all of her brushes, all of her canvases, a lot of paint swatches that she used to experiment with the colors that she wanted. She had a routine of painting, of mixing colors and identifying the colors that she wanted in New Mexico, in the New Mexico light, and then would travel back to New York and then paint in New York, but knowing the colors that she wanted to evoke. And so some of those things are there and available. The archives itself, again, includes a lot of photography, but it also includes a lot of other types of correspondence and different clippings and various other materials that are in it. The books, we have not gone out and harvested thumbnails from all of the books in her library, but there's 2,300 items from her personal library that are available to see. And that's important. We'll show you how that fits in a minute. And then the last one, which I think is most fun, and we'll go back to toward the end of this demo, is her homes and possessions. So all of these things, her clothing, her wardrobe, her cooking materials, her appliances, everything in the homes, her stereo systems, are all available in the collection. So it's a very eclectic and wide-ranging collection, but gives a really good profile to her. There's also an extensive cataloging of people that the O'Keeffe have done, a tremendous number of people and organizations, suppliers that she used, galleries she was involved with, other institutions that are involved. And so all of these things are available. We're going to start with the art, as one does. And we'll look at O'Keeffe's art and just focus on the paintings. And let's just pick the 1940s. And so here we see an array of work in that period of time where she was moving to New Mexico and actively painting primarily subjects that relate to New Mexico. I'm going to pick the Black Place 3. And here's where we begin to really start seeing more. I mean, the IIIF is serving the thumbnails, but here's where we really begin to see it, because all of this work is available in high resolution. And we're using the OpenSea Dragon viewer, and you see you can really get in here and really start seeing some amazing things with the brush strokes, with the layering of colors and textures. And I'm not an artist, so I can't really do the descriptions justice, but I think the fact that you can get in and see these different techniques that she's using and the way that she's presenting that and the way that the work evolves over the years is a phenomenal resource. The tombstone information, the basic label information is presented at the top along with the image. And underneath that, we have two tabs. We're going to start, for the data geeks, we're going to start with about the object, where you see the catalog raisonné number, inscriptions, provenance. Some of these, like this one, have an extensive exhibition history, and then all the other information, including the ability both to view and download an individual record's data. And so here we see the JSON LD for this particular work. So the real heart of this, and where we focused a lot of our attention, was in the relationships. And this is really where the linked data part is particularly important. So the relationships are a series of different kinds of connections. So there are direct references where in the collections management system, there are explicit ID references to archival material or other art material. Here's a preparatory sketch from when she was when she was there. Here's some photographs of the work in progress at various stages, which are in the archive. we can look by time period and say, what else was she working on in that same period? In paintings, what other kinds of archival objects were available in that period, and different types of objects that might be there. And then there's this wealth of the exhibition. So the O'Keeffe folks have done a phenomenal job at capturing all of the exhibitions that they have, and the materials that were exhibited there at various times. And this is one of the areas where, again, from the linked data side, it's something that is been talked a lot about, and Rana will talk further about it, but these are works from within the O'Keeffe collection that were in that exhibition, but there would also be loaned works and things from other institutions. And the idea of using linked data and IIIF as a collaboration mechanism to create a fully rounded picture of things that were in different exhibitions is one of the areas that I think is very exciting, and one that they're really is a real driver for them in the project. So I'm going to go back here. Yep.
Duane, can I mention something there?
Yeah, sure.
One thing I wanted to mention about that is that, in terms of this at the beginning at the head of the project, you kind of have this classic problem of, separate disciplines having separate systems. And one of the things that's nice that you see in this relationships tab, that you kind of can see in the background of it, is that collections management systems are often thinking about what's in the building right now, and not necessarily, like, everybody's getting much better at it, but not necessarily the things that are not in the building right now, like things that are not in that are no longer in the building but were in a past exhibition. So what I kind of like about this, the exhibition tabs especially, is that it kind of makes the artworks a little bit more archival, in the same way that including them in sliders with archival objects and sliders with art objects makes the archival objects a little bit more art-like in terms of how you interact with them.
It's certainly been an interest in the O'Keeffe exhibitions to incorporate archival objects more into exhibitions themselves, and so it's given an opportunity to again represent those online. So I'm just going to dip here into the pelvis one, which is another work from the same year. And here we see, direct reference to the actual physical object as it was photographed by Todd Webb. We see again the time period of the other paintings and various other things here that are part of the way you can explore that. I'm going to go from there into a letter here. And one of the reasons I sort of took this particular trip is I happen to know that this is a letter from O'Keeffe to Alfred Stieglitz that included a photo of the pelvis work that was being done at the time. And if we look here and zoom in, you'll see here now where she's actually talking about the pelvis, and well, this is not very good, but I'm going to be doing this with it. And so now you begin to start seeing how she's thinking about it as she actually does that work. And so it's really nice to be able to fairly seamlessly move across. And this is a design principle that we're really trying to apply to everything that we're doing right now, is this idea of horizontal movement through different contexts, and this exploratory behavior that doesn't require search. It doesn't require somebody knowing absolutely what they're looking for. It doesn't require explicit curatorial, you can only see it in one particular way, but to create this really seamless movement through a collection of materials. So again, relationships, the foundation of every page, every type of page. Dipping into Alfred Stieglitz, we see, among other things, it was a photograph by Ansel Adams. She and Adams had known each other for many, many years, both in New York and then certainly out in the Southwest. He was a regular visitor when he was shooting out in the Southwest. And you see that we have the photographed and depicted. So let's go on over and look at the Stieglitz page itself. Now here we have a different presentation, which is role-based. So this gets a little bit to the question Martin was asking about how we reconcile different things. The reconciliations are mostly using IDs that are put in by the catalogers. And so they will identify it, they will have a record for Alfred Stieglitz in each of the collections that they can associate with the objects. And then we create the links between objects and the ability to pull sets of objects in context by data that's coming from ULAN. So in this case, their ULAN IDs or the ULAN and Library of Congress IDs are cross-connected. In our database, there's just, actually, I think Wikidata is maybe where we pulled the relationship connection between the ULAN Stieglitz and the Library of Congress Stieglitz. And then those are integrated in our mappings. So when any one of the systems sends something related to Stieglitz, we can make sure that they're all connected to each other. But you see here, we've introduced the idea of roles. So what are the things where Stieglitz was depicted in? What are the things where Stieglitz was the author of something, the recipient of something, or as an artist and photographer, what are the ones where it's a photographer of it? So we see there's 159 images where he's a photographer, 235 where he's a recipient of letters and such. I'm going to select this first one, the Boney and Liverwright Publishers. Doesn't really, not that much in itself. That, there is, this is not transcribed, but there is, information about a person and a book that again could at some future date by some researcher be identified and incorporated into this network of information. The thing that's interesting here is that it was originally located in that publication, and actually, as we discover, there's a direct relationship to that publication, which was in her personal library. And the reason this relationship is here is the letter was actually tucked in the pages. And so as part of the library's practice of cataloging, as they go through books and find objects, they may be photographs, they may be little scribbled notes, they may be letters such as this one that's tucked in there. They catalog it, they catalog that it was identified in that book in their library system, and then pass that over to the archives, who catalogs it as an archival object. So the book is in the library, the archival object, the letter in this case, is in the archives, and both of them ID back to each other, so they're able to identify what's there. So it's a really interesting way of sort of moving through this and thinking about the way that you you actually are looking at this. And again, it's really the fact that you can start seeing these things, the catalogers are using these things, and they're turning that into data. So I'm going to from there then just dip back into, as I say, one of my favorite areas, the homes and artist possessions, because there's such a wonderful collection of things here. All of the things that are inside both Abiquiu and Ghost Ranch. I'm going to focus for the moment on the clothing. In the clothing, again, it's more than just, hey, look, we happen to have all this clothing. This is actually really valuable in a couple ways. One is that it actually helps see some things about her practice. There are like particular soft shoes she wears sometimes out in the desert are worn in order to not disrupt the ecosystem of the desert where she's actually walking. There are different types of clothing she wears that handle the different climate changes in terms of particularly temperature changes in New Mexico and such. Not to mention that she was just sort of known for a particular look and a style. I'm going to dip into this belt. It's the last one we're going to take a look at here. This was one of her favorite belts, and I actually happened to see it on loan in the Milwaukee Art Museum just a couple weeks ago. I was fortunate to see that, but she wore it a lot. And so the other thing is it helps with provenance and identifying relationships that she had with other artists to use archival photographs and in this case, an art collection photograph that has her wearing certain things dated in certain periods. And that means that it's much easier to begin to identify that information in the works. I also love the fact that there's not only this this belt, but there's an Alexander Calder brooch here as well in this, which I think is really nice to be able to see, again, these interconnections that she has with all the different artists. So anyway, I've gone on quite a bit about that, but I want to just take a sec in the interest of time. I'm now sort of well overrun my time, but I want to take a sec and just say, you know, IIIF and the role of IIIF's contribution is really in being able to manage images from multiple sources and multiple types of metadata around them, use them to create these very easy, lightweight, high-res, zoomable images, to reduce the amount of derivatives that are having to be managed, and that makes it simpler to scale and expand the collection over time. And also the fact that we're able to use common and consistent URL patterns and share things across multiple institutions. So both the IIIF and linked data are around that integration and expansion opportunities. And with that, unless anybody has any other specific questions on that, I'm going to turn it over to Rana, who is going to talk about where the O'Keeffe is thinking about going from here and what other kinds of things they want to do. Any questions while we swap over?
Thanks, Duane. That was great. I just wanted to mention that we have about 10 more minutes.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem at all. This is great.
Alrighty, thank you, Duane. Let me see if I can share my screen really quickly. Sorry, I'm new to Zoom, so apologies if it's a little bit clunky on my end. Okay. Alrighty, can you all see what I'm seeing?
Yep, Google Slides.
Yes. Okay, so as Duane mentioned, the Collections Online beta version was launched last September, and I joined the team in June of 2018. So there was a lot of work that predated me, but we've I mean, the entire experience of putting the collections online together has really reshaped a lot of the relationships between not only the way that we see data, but the way that our staff interacts with each other. And we're really excited for what this means for our projects in the future. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. And the first of which is that we now see linked open data as an opportunity to feed back all of the research and scholarship that is happening around O'Keeffe and her contemporaries. And in particular, one of the resources that we rely on really heavily at the museum is O'Keeffe's catalog raisonné, which is a comprehensive listing of all of her known works. And this publication came out in 1999, which means that as of today, or as of this year, it'll be celebrating its 21st birthday. And a lot of research has come out since its publication. And so we really see linked open data and IIIF as a way to take all of the research that's been done by fellows at the museum and scholars around the world and really start to add that back into what was known at the time of the catalog raisonné's publication in 1999. And one of the really exciting components of that, and something that Duane demonstrated really well, is that we'd really like to expand connection points to O'Keeffe. And this really, we'd like to see this worked into in-gallery interactives in the form of connecting to audiences that we wouldn't normally engage with. So for example, a lot of the folks that come to our museum have known O'Keeffe for many years by her art, but as Duane showed, there are so many parts of our collection that don't have to do with her art necessarily or directly, like our archival materials and her personal property. And there are so many ways in which we feel that we can connect to visitors, not just through art, but through different avenues that might be unexpected. So for example, if you are a photography buff and you're very well acquainted with Ansel Adams or Todd Webb, you can see in our collection photographs from those photographers. And so I've kind of put together a little example here of maybe an inroad into O'Keeffe's artwork that we don't normally see and we don't see now in our galleries, which is to start from O'Keeffe as she's depicted in a photograph by Todd Webb and maybe move towards where she was when she was in that photo, which was Glen Canyon. And this photo in the middle is a photo that O'Keeffe took in a trip to Glen Canyon in 1964. And the artwork on the very right-hand side is a painting, Canyon Country, White and Brown Cliffs, which she painted in 1965. And really what we'd love our audiences to see through this progression through various collection objects is a visual explanation of O'Keeffe's process. And so between that middle photo and the painting on the right, one of the concepts that we really struggled to communicate is the concept of O'Keeffe's process. And how do we do that to somebody who's maybe not well-versed in art history? And how do we do that visually? Because that's in a lot of ways how our staff thinks, but how our audiences think as well. So just to be able to see the visual reference that O'Keeffe started with, and then her process of distillation as it becomes a painting. So the next topic that I wanted to touch on is our internal capabilities. So we've already seen a lot of our departments come together through the process of the collections online site development. And in many ways, I really see this relationship growing to departments outside of registration and collections, which is where a lot of the discussion has happened as of now. And so let me see. So this is an example that that Duane had demonstrated earlier. We have the belt from Hector Aguilar on the left, and a very well-known photograph by Tony Vaccaro in which that belt is depicted. And to me, these two photos represent different departments within our institution. On the left, we have our registration department, and on the right, we have our curators. And prior to the Collections Online project, these departments were largely siloed, and a lot of the work that happened in the registration department didn't necessarily connect to the work that was happening in the curators department. But since the project, we've had meetings between departments where our registrars actually see where their work is manifesting itself in connecting objects and paintings to each other. And that's been really exciting. They're actually planning, our registrars and our curators are actually planning on presenting more about this at AM this year, because it's been such a sea change in the way that we see collaboration between departments. And moving forward, we really love to engage other departments such as our communications department, education, and retail. There's so many times where our research collections and services department is asked, can you show me a picture of O'Keeffe wearing a watch, for example, or O'Keeffe wearing this belt? And we'd really love to leverage the annotation part of IIIF to be able to identify where these objects are located and expand the relationship between the objects and the archival materials and the fine art photography as well. So this is just a screenshot of that page on the Collections Online site, which Duane showed you earlier. And then most excitingly, I think, is this last part, Beyond the Walls, which really kind of leverages our ability to communicate what's happening here at the museum to institutions across the world. And one of the things that visitors often come to our museum expecting is O'Keeffe's most well-known paintings. For example, Jimson Weed, which was acquired by Crystal Bridges in 2014. And a lot of times they come to our institution looking for paintings like Jimson Weed or the poppies, and they're often very much disappointed when they don't see those paintings. And what we'd really like to do is use IIIF to build connections between our institution and other institutions that have O'Keeffe's iconic works, so we can start to develop a network and show our audiences that not only can they find O'Keeffe here, but there are so many other places across the country and around the world where O'Keeffe's work can be seen. And one idea that our head conservator Dale is really excited about is the ability to annotate images of paintings in collaboration with other conservators at other institutions. So for example, if we host an exhibition that's in Australia or in Switzerland, we have the ability to create condition reports which show various spots on a painting where conservation has been done, or where conservation may need to be done, and where institutions that we share our paintings with can also participate in that conversation as well when the work is loaned to them. And so I think that's basically a summary of what we're hoping to do. I should say that IIIF and integrating this data infrastructure has already proven to be extremely valuable to us. We applied for an IMLS grant last December to rephotograph our entire collection, and we received it this past November. And one of the comments from the grant reviewers is that we were well poised to receive the grant because of all of the work we've done with our infrastructure. So it's a really exciting time for us to see how we move forward from here. Thank you.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you, Rana and Duane, for a great presentation. Are there any questions? I know we have a few minutes left, and there's still items 4 and 5, which we may need to talk about later, but if there's any questions for Duane or Rana?
Very nice work.
Yeah, this is a really great example, that you could show about how linked data works. So thank you.
I have a quick question for Duane.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, that was extremely impressive and really interesting demonstration. I just have a question as far as like the UI or the presentation. Do you sort of let the linked data run free, so to speak? Like I'm interested in the case there's like redundant relationships. Have you ever encountered an issue where there's redundancy on the page in terms of what's displayed?
Yeah, and Charlie may want to jump in on this one as well, but what we've done in a couple circumstances is partly using Elasticsearch and partly using some of the internal rules that we can build in around the JavaScript, just create some simple rules for how you weight things. So for example, in the relationships, there are things that say if this thing has appeared here, then it won't not appear, but if it has appeared here in this relationship, then it downweights other one, its appearance in others to try and not sort of introduce too much redundancy. So there's some things that as we see it, we tune the way the data is queried, but we also sort of tune the awareness of itself in the UI at some level. Charlie, was there anything else you wanted to say to that?
That's pretty much all of it. I mean, it's one part where using Elasticsearch was really a great help because you can use, by using the scoring, by trying to be a little bit clever with the scoring, you can keep, because basically all the data for those sliders is built off of the Elasticsearch cluster, since it's the only front-end system that really knows what things look like on the page or what things may look like on the page. So we just use a little query trickery and then some really basic sort of batch limiting stuff on the parts that actually like write the JSON.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and I just wanted to mention that if Duane and Rana are okay with it, if there are any other questions that they can be asked on the museums channel and our IIIF Slack channel.
Mm-hmm.
Is that all right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great, awesome. So we have number 4 on the agenda. I think because we have a presentation around dams next month, we can probably talk about these questions next time. But if anyone has questions or discussion topics around dams, please add them to this doc, and so that we have them and can kind of look ahead to see what kinds of discussion points we're going to plan around. And then discussion topics real quick. Stefano, are you here? Do you want to talk about that? Okay, maybe he's not here. And then someone posted about the Culture Geek Conference. I'm not sure who posted that, but if anyone wants to talk about that real quick.
Hi, I'm here.
I added that.
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to introduce the topic that I want to bring up, the topics that I want to bring up in the next meetings. In June, in the Göttingen IIIF meeting, we had a really good museum working group meeting, and we came up with some topics that we wanted to flesh out about what is particular about museums, what is unique in IIIF that museums have. Sorry. And those we came up with some notes that I can't find the chat right now. I will paste it in the chat whenever I find it. But so there are some aspects that we discussed during that meeting. For example, the content model, and also Duane's presentation about the defaults at the O'Keeffe Museum is a very great example about how IIIF is a great visual support for linked data, which in museums is a particularly important application. So there are several topics that I would like to discuss. And the next one for the next meeting, I would like anyone who has particular ways that they want or they display their data in IIIF and they the way they model their contents with IIIF, they are welcome to share them. That's it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Stefano. So yeah, if anyone would like to talk about that, please add your interest under number 5 so that we could plan for a future call. And then Josh mentioned that he will talk more about the Culture Geek Conference in the Slack channel. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for coming. Great to see some new faces and always the old, or new names, always the old. And Happy New Year again. We'll see you guys next month.
Thanks, Tina.
Thanks, Tina.
Thank you.